Hello and welcome into another edition of the Sun Devil Source podcast presented by Jones Auto Centers and Jones Ford Verde Valley. I'm your host, Jacob Brooks, and as always, I'm joined by our Sun Devil Source publisher, Chris Cartman. Chris, how's it going on this Thursday?
It's going well. Weather's gotten a lot better here in Arizona. Love that October feel. Should be a great atmosphere and great conditions. Perfect football weather on Saturday for ASU Texas Tech. How are you doing though, Jacob?
I'm doing good, man. Locked in, ready to go. We're joined for this episode for the second week in a row by Sun Devil Source staff writer Joaquin Rodriguez. Joaquin, how are you doing?
Going good. Excited to break into deep dive into Texas Tech. It's going to be
Yes,
some
so
good
that's
stuff.
That's what we're going to be going over on this episode. Like Joaquin alluded to, we're going to be deep diving ASU football's upcoming matchup against Texas Tech for this Saturday. We're going to have a special guest appearance from Jarrett Johnson, the publisher of InsideTheRedRaiders.com, which is under that 247 Sports umbrella. We're going to get into what to expect from Tech's offense and defense. ASU's offense and defense are keys to the game, and official score predictions. So a lot of fun stuff coming up. Chris, I want to toss to you first. A lot of injury news surrounding ASU football over the last couple of weeks. Obviously, Sam Leavitt didn't play last week against Utah. What can you tell us about ASU's injury report for this game, as well as Texas Tech's injury report for this game?
Yeah, so the good news for ASU is that Sam Leavitt's probably going to play, listed as probable on the Big 12 availability report in practice on Wednesday, moved well in the pocket, didn't have any tape on his right foot, which had been taped a day earlier, and also had been in a walking boot on Saturday when he missed his first game of the season against Utah. That's a very positive sign against a defense that's as formidable as Texas Tech, as we're going to get into in a bit. But there's a lot of other injury news that's not good for ASU. Cyrus Fiaseu, their top backup linebacker, is out for the season with a foot injury that required surgery. Ben Coleman, their starting center or left guard, depending on the week, who's been one of the top team leaders in the last year and a half, seventh-year college player, is out for the season. He had surgery yesterday to repair a torn biceps tendon. Kyson Brown, who was their starting running back at the outset of the season, suffered a foot or ankle injury against Mississippi State, tried to come back from that. That didn't really work out so well. He's now in a walking boot. He's going to miss at least the next couple of games. So his season has significantly been derailed. And then Zach Swanson, who's probably their third best defensive tackle, been off and on with a foot injury that he sustained that required surgery in April. He's not going to be able to play in this game. Canyon Floyd, ASU's punter, has had a quad injury that's basically cost him the last month now at this point, and I don't think he's going to go either. And there's a bunch of other ASU players that are really playing through lingering injuries. You got guys that have ligament tears or broken bones and other things that they're dealing with. And so this team has been hit with the injury bug much more than last season. And there's a lot of potential reasons for that. We're not going to get into that in this particular podcast. Texas Tech also has a few key guys that we're going to be watching closely, but Skylar Gill Howard, who's their top interior defensive line rusher, as a 3 technique, he's going to be out. He got hurt, carted off, in fact, against Kansas. So that's a hit for a very great Texas Tech defensive front. Also, Romello Height, who's one of the top pass rushers in the Big 12, probably in the country, is questionable with an unspecified injury. And then Baron Morton, who's their quarterback, left the game in the second quarter against Kansas and didn't come back. Will Howard, their backup, played well, and he has throughout the season because Morton's had some injury issues off and on here. Morton is listed as questionable. There seems to be more of a belief that he'll play versus not play, but that could be a mobility issue for him because that was a leg issue that he appeared to be dealing with. So we'll continue to watch these injuries and provide more on our socials and at Sun Devil Source between now and when the game starts.
Yeah, Chris, and I want to get to something that you kind of hinted at so many different points throughout your discussion of the injuries, which is that Texas Tech is a really formidable opponent. Anybody that we've talked to at ASU practices has been open about the fact that, hey, this is a really tough task. I mean, they're ranked top 10 in the country. So I kind of want to go to you, Joaquin, and get some insight on how Texas Tech was able to put this formidable of a team together. We know that there's a former Texas Tech O lineman who's now an oil and gas billionaire named Cody Campbell, who spearheaded some of their NIL efforts. And now Tech is one of the most expensive rosters in college football history. Can you just give us some insight into the process that laid out this Tech team?
Well, yeah, you spoke on that. Cody Campbell, he's a former alum, went to Texas Tech, played, had a small stint in the NFL before diving into that oil and gas industry. And the key thing is, like, Texas Tech finished 8-5 last year under head coach Joe McGuire. That was his best record up until that point. But following the season, there was a clear plea by fans and Texas Tech alum around social media to like clearly want improvement around that team. Now that led to Cody Campbell, an oil and gas billionaire in West Texas, to kind of lead that troop of fans wanting change down in Lubbock, Texas, and kind of opening the Matador Club, raising a reported $40 million to bring in a new and improved roster and bring in 21 transfers. That's the most of any team in the country, along with kind of acknowledging some fans online. There was some clear people are upset with how the offensive line played in Texas Tech last season. That led to Cody Campbell to post on social media, "I will buy us an offensive line." And I mean,
That's one way to do it.
he clearly did that. I mean, last year the offensive line in Texas Tech ranked 11th in the Big 12, surrendering 20-some sacks. And now 6 games into the season, they've only surrendered 6 and are in the top 3 in the Big 12. So the offensive line has completely flipped, one of the massive increases of that Texas Tech team that was a struggle last year, and has really allowed Baron Morton to kind of produce and be successful in that air raid offense.
Look, Texas Tech took advantage of the NIL rules as they existed. People, I think, understand that NIL became a big thing in college sports several years ago. And there was then a move to try to get some more organizational structuring around what's allowed and what's not allowed this year, with colleges now able to share revenue up to $20.5 million per school. And ASU is a 18 million per, for its school. And roughly most of these schools are giving about 75% of their revenue share between that 18 million and 20.5 million, depending on whether you've been a scholarship expansion school or not, which ASU has been, to football. So we're talking about 13 to 15 million dollars roughly that most of these power conference schools are sharing with their football players and revenue. But what happened is before there became a new college sports commission, which is supposed to be evaluating all of these NIL deals into the future for fair market valuation and whether or not they're going to be allowed. Texas Tech and a lot of other schools were able to, with their winter transfer portal, spring transfer portal, bring in a lot of players before these new rules were codified, and when boosters could basically pay any amount of money that they wanted to bring in transfers or to retain their roster. There's some concern out there that some of these teams will just ignore the whole college sports commission, and there may be lawsuits and other things that ultimately determine the viability of that and whether or not everybody adheres to these rules or whatnot. We're still in a limbo situation in a lot of ways. But when you have a billionaire former player who's willing to put millions of dollars toward a roster, that's a very significant advantage. Last year, as a comparison, ASU's entire NIL spend for football was only $3 to $4 million. And now ASU spending, I think, around $13.5 million in revenue share. Texas Tech is doing the same thing. But then on top of that, Texas Tech has doubled that amount, at least probably, on its roster in NIL to put together this extremely talented team that I think is the best talent on a roster that ASU will have played in the Big 12, and ASU's coaches seem to think that as well, with Kenny Dillingham basically saying that this is the toughest opponent that ASU will have faced at this point in the conference.
Yeah, a lot of interesting stuff there from both of you guys in terms of the future of college football. Now, before we get into what to expect from Texas Tech's offense, we're going to have a quick word from our presenting sponsors over at Jones Auto Centers. Welcome back into the Sun Devil Source podcast presented by Jones Auto Centers. Wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast, check out the description because you can contact Parker Jones directly through phone or email if you're interested in buying a new or used vehicle from one of Jones Auto Centers' many dealerships around the valley. Parker Jones and Jones Blvd Valley have been huge supporters of ASU's NIL efforts over the past couple of years, so we're proud to have them as our sponsors, and that gives you another great reason to make them your go-to if you live in the Valley and need a new or used vehicle. All right, guys, let's dive straight into Texas Tech's offense. We talked a lot about their NIL spending. This has led to their offense being very formidable going up against that ASU defense. They're near the top of the ranks in the national leaderboards in several categories under their new offensive coordinator. Joaquin, what can you tell us about the Red Raider offense?
Well, yeah, formidable is the right word. I mean, they rank top in the nation in so many stat categories. Number 1 in total offense at 558.2 yards per game. The number 2 scoring offense. The number 3 passing offense. The number 14 rushing offense, all in the nation. So Kenny Dillingham, Chris alluded to this. Kenny Dillingham said this is the most talented team he thinks they'll play. And I mean, they played every bit like that NIL they've spent on that roster up until this point. They're 6-0, ranked number 7 in the nation, the highest ranking they've been since 2008. I don't know how many college football fans we have that are deep diving into Texas Tech. That's the year Michael Crabtree had that walk-off catch against Texas, against number 1 Texas. Big time year for Texas Tech. Now going into the offense, they're led by, much like their roster, first-year offensive coordinator Matt Leftwich. He spent last season as Texas State. He had him as the top 15 offense in that season at Texas State, came over to Lubbock, and that offense has not missed a beat since being at Texas State. They're an air raid offense that complements that air raid with a lot of run-heavy systems. It kind of opens up the passing game, has defenses working in a lot of different things, having to see different things. Leading that offense is quarterback Baron Morton. He's thrown for 1,500-plus yards, 13 touchdowns, and completed nearly 70% of his passes. Now, we spoke about how Baron Morton's one of those guys that's going to be questionable. He was listed as doubtful in that recent Wednesday night injury report. He's left 3 games earlier this season, but started every game. Replacing him in every game is redshirt freshman quarterback Will Hammond. Kenny Dillingham and Brian Ward both spoke about him this week, saying they see him as a guy who's going to play on Sundays. He's a super talented, super fast, run-heavy quarterback who can also throw the ball. So regardless of who Texas Tech sends out under center, they have a guy who's able to do damage against any defense they play. Now, running the ball is Cameron Dickey. Texas Tech actually had their projected starting running back go down with a torn ACL during fall camp this season. That led to a lot of people being like, was that the first blow that Texas Tech is going to undergo in this crazy roster overhaul? But Cameron Dickey has stepped up to the challenge. He's rushed for nearly 600 yards, 8 touchdowns. That's second in the Big 12 in rushing. And Kenny Dillingham was actually asked in his Monday presser if he reminds him a little bit of Cam Scadaboo. Dillingham alluded to the fact that there's some similarities, that low center of gravity, the ability to break tackles. So Cameron Dickey is one of those guys who's going to be able to make runs, break tackles. He had a 71-yard rushing touchdown against Kansas in Texas Tech's opening drive. So he has the power to break loose and break free on some touchdowns. Now, at wide receiver, they have 3 receivers with 20-plus receptions, Caleb Douglas, Corey Eakin, and Reggie Virgil. Reggie Virgil, a Miami of Ohio transfer. He's accounted for 23 receptions, 286 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And at tight end, they have a Louisiana Lafayette transfer, Terrence Carter. He's one of those guys who can line up in line as a tight end, block for runs, but he's also become a red zone threat. He has 5 receiving touchdowns, the most of the entire Texas Tech offense. And all around top to bottom, this offense just has so much talent and depth, the most that Arizona State is going to have to go up against. up until this point.
Yeah, one slight correction is Morton's listed as questionable, not doubtful. So I think he's probably going to play, but we'll find out. We thought Sam Levitt was going to play until later than this on Thursday of Utah week. So so we'll see. But look, I think this is a potent and dynamic offense. Like they will maul you at the line of scrimmage. They significantly upgraded their offensive line. They're big bullies. They do a great job in pass pro. They make it very easy on their quarterback to stay protected and be able to search for where they want to throw the ball. They hit really big, explosive runs. Like Dickey went off against Kansas. He had like several really long runs where he was almost untouched. But then he also has that Scadaboo-like contact balance. Not saying he's of that caliber, but he's very good at 215 pounds. And it takes a lot to bring him to the ground, and especially when you have that good of an offensive line that's blocking in front of you. Now, the good news for opponents in ASU is that it's more traditional style offense, like the run game, split zone, duo. They bring some pullers, they run counter, they get some lead blockers on some outside off tackle type runs. But it's the same types of things that ASU goes up against with facing its own offense. And so it shouldn't be a challenge for opponents to understand where these blockers are going to be, where the runs are likely to hit, the gaps that they're going to have to be aware of, things like that. But for being an air raid quote unquote system, they have really great balance with their rushing attack. They run the ball a lot better than most teams of this style. And they also are really good at spreading the football around. Like they have at least five guys that can line up and be targeted as the first read on a lot of plays, and they get a lot of quick hitters. They create a lot of conflict with the way that they're able to play fast, play up tempo, get going before opponents are kind of lined up, have the balance. They use their tight end, the transfer very well in the run game. And then if Hammond is the quarterback, they do a tremendous amount of design quarterback run and run option stuff using tight ends as lead blockers. And so this is a very tall task. ASU did play against Texas State last year, and there's a lot of familiarity in the system to what ASU is going to be facing. And so there's things about this matchup that I think are a little bit more favorable for the Sun Devils than Utah, especially when Utah had a bye week and is so matchup driven as far as like scheming to an opponent's weaknesses and changing what they're going to do versus what Texas Tech is going to do, which is basically the same things on a week-to-week basis. And you're going to have to just stop it against like I said, an offensive line that will maul you in the run game, protect at a very high level, and distribute the ball by spreading it around extremely well. Hammond is even though he's less dynamic athletically, he's more ball secure. If they do have to go with their backup, he's more prone to putting the ball in jeopardy in the passing game. And so in that construct, keeping him bottled up and making him a pocket passer would be more of the goal that ASU would have. With Hammond, ASU, is going to have some of the same challenges as Utah in terms of how mobile he is and the things that he's able to do. But Morton, a player that ASU already played last year and has a lot of familiarity with, he's going to try to beat you from the pocket. And so you have to be successful against the run game, which is easier said than done, and try to make him throw the ball through a lot of windows into your secondary, which is one of the strengths of your team.
All right. Now, as for ASU's defense against this Texas Tech offense, Chris, you had a lot to say about ASU's defense on our post-game show following that Utah loss. And Kenny Dillingham talked a lot about how he feels like it falls on his shoulders and that he needs to rise the level of physicality in practice with his defense in terms of tackling and blocking on both sides, everything like that. So ASU implemented live tackling in practice this week, which is a little bit uncommon for this team at this stage in the season. Joaquin, I want to start with you. Do you think ASU's defense is going to bounce back in this matchup, and how do they match up against a very, very formidable Texas Tech offense?
Well, yeah, ASU played one of its poorest defensive games. Well, I think the poorest defensive game in that Utah matchup last Saturday. And the key issue for that was tackling. Kenny Dillingham spoke about it. Brian Ward was asked about it on Tuesday. They just couldn't tackle. And against Texas Tech, if you let Cameron Dickey run free and don't get a body on him, he's going to break free for touchdowns. So I think that physicality brought in at practice, then you found emphasis on tackling and getting guys down and making contact. I think the defense is going to play a better game than that Utah game. I think it's hard to predict this defense that brought back 10 of 11 starters and was the number one rushing defense in the Big 12 last season to just put on a poor performance like that again. So in terms of bounce back, I definitely see them playing a lot better, but also this is the new type of offense. This offense isn't going to try to run it on triple option threat every single play. They're going to organize. They're going to hit their 4 receiver options. They're going to hand it off. They're going to throw screen passes. So it's a lot different of a challenge, but defensively, I expect them to play a lot better just because of the fact that they returned so much talent from last season's team.
Dillingham challenged his team this week in practice. We saw it at the end of Wednesday's practice. He said, we can either talk about it or we can be about it, and we're going to be about it the rest of the season. And so their challenge is to prove that Utah game where they got completely dominated physically at the point of attack while also having extremely poor tackling was anomalous. If that's anomalous, then given what we've seen from ASU in the last year and a half, absent that Utah game, then ASU will be able to put together a defense that can allow it to hang in the game with Texas Tech as a double-digit underdog. That's really the whole key. Utah had more than 150 yards after initial contact on the ball carrier. Anything remotely close to that in this game means it's going to be a blowout loss for ASU. That was the worst performance by ASU's defensive line, by its linebackers, by its safeties. Cornerbacks played decently well, but that's not enough with all the other flaws that ASU put forth in that game. This is going to take a extremely physical approach and mindset by CJ Fight, eating up double teams on the inside. Jacob Kangaika, didn't really hear his name called that much against Utah. He's going to have to rise to the occasion. No Zach Swanson. Okay, Anthony Cooper, Blazing Lono Wong, you guys got to step up on the interior. And then ASU's defensive ends, Prince Dorba, Clayton Smith. I think this is a big Justin Watley game because he's a bigger, heavier end. Elijah O'Neal. Also, those guys are going to need to not allow Texas Tech to capture them on the edges so that Dickey can't run the ball off tackle. They like to have a lot of those off tackle runs. And then ASU's linebackers got to have a much better performance. The tackling was atrocious. Keyshawn Elliott and Jordan Crook and the backups, Tate Romney, Martell Hughes, these guys have to play a lot better than they did in that game. ASU safeties, Boogie Wilson was at the line of scrimmage and wasn't as good there as he was playing at depth, right? So Texas Tech, they understand what just happened to ASU in that game against Utah, and they're going to make ASU try to stop the run, to commit more bodies into the box to do so, to then allow their passing game to be able to have more room to throw the ball around the yard. And they do that at a very high level. For ASU to be successful, you got to be able to wall off at the line of scrimmage, bring your guys back into more coverage, and get takeaways. Texas Tech is first in the Big 12 in turnover margin. ASU is just a notch below that. Turnover margin in this game going to be super important. There is a possibility to take the ball away from Morton, or if they have their backup quarterback in, certainly that makes it even perhaps a little bit easier to do so. Got to punch the ball out when you're making tackles. You got to be able to do things that get you the opportunity to get negative plays and takeaways. Got to play with your hair on fire. This is a nationally televised game, 1 p.m. early at home. What are you doing? This is it. Are you going to rise to the challenge? It's not going to be any tougher than this one. Even compared to Utah, this is a more physically demanding challenge. And to your point, Dillingham made his players tackle in practice on a Tuesday. They had not done so at all this season to this point because I think of their injuries. They tried to have more of a professional approach to their bye week. Veteran team wanted to allow guys to sort of rest up and recover and be physically ready for this stretch, and the guys handled it extremely poorly. Lesson learned, Dillingham said. I don't think he's going to ever do that again. He's going to practice hard, even if guys are in green jerseys and they can't be out there. That was the response that he got from his players. We saw Miles Rouser pop Jordan Tyson pretty good. And then they got up, they were jawing at each other, and Prince Dorba said, that's what we need as a team. And that was the type of banter and interaction that we saw quite often with ASU in camp, even going back to spring ball. And they're trying to recapture that this week and show that it was an anomaly and not a trend. If this becomes a trend, then they got a lot of even bigger problems. And we're going to be talking about that a week from now.
Yeah. As much as we talked about Texas Tech's offense and the problems that they could pose for ASU, Texas Tech's defense is the exact same way. You touched on it a bit in the injury report section, Chris, but Texas Tech has one of the very best defensive lines in the entire country. Joaquin, what can you tell us about Texas Tech's defense?
Yeah, much like the offense, they're dominant. They're the number one rush defense in the nation, number 9 total defense, tied for the 5th most sacks with 21, which is number 1 in the Big 12. And they're led by, just like the offensive coordinator, much of the team, a first-year coordinator in Sheil Wood. He spent last season at Houston as an assistant, came over to Texas Tech, and brought over, just along with players, a dominant scheme. They run a base 4-2-5, but the secret of this defense is the fact that they can get pressure at the quarterback and stop the run with only 4 guys. And that allows 7 people to drop into coverage. They have some of the best linebackers in the nation in Jacob Rodriguez. He has the most tackles in the Big 12 of 47, 2 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, and a sack to go along with that. He was an all-conference first-team player last year, came back, kind of leads that defensive unit. Going into that 4-base defense, though, the kind of secrets to that defense is edge rusher David Bailey and Romello High. They're both transfers, Bailey from Stanford, High from Georgia Tech. And the key is they don't just rush 4 at you down line, traditional rush defense. They're going to hit you with stunts. They're going to hit you with twists. Romello High had a few plays against Kansas where he swept around his defensive end, got into Daniels' backfield, took him down for 15-yard sacks, 18-yard sacks. They have the ability to kill drives with their pass rush. Then you go into their secondary. Much like their offense, they're just talented. They have a defensive back, Bryce Pollock. He's a Mississippi State transfer. Jordan Tyson spoke about him on Tuesday. They played against him last season. He played pretty well. He leads the Texas Tech secondary with 3 interceptions. So much like the offense, they're just very talented, and they have the ability to get after the quarterback while only rushing 4, which is a big advantage when you go against an offense that kind of wants to rely on their rush defense to complement their passing.
Yeah. This is one of the best defensive lines in college football. And it would be probably any year. Joaquin didn't even mention Lee Hunter. He's a 330-pound nose tackle who commands double teams. Like, he is a dominant physical player that helps Texas Tech be the number 1 run-stopping defense in the country, giving up 10 fewer rushing yards per game than any other team in the country. And granted, Texas Tech had a very weak non-conference schedule: Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Kent State, Oregon State. So that's a factor. But Utah, Houston, Kansas, that's nothing to dismiss. To be able to win in blowout fashion against all of those teams by no less than 24 points, that is quite impressive. And it starts with their run stopping ability. A lot of times when you have great pass rushers, you're trading off something when you're rushing with 4 in terms of your run stopping ability. But that is not the case with Texas Tech. These guys, David Bailey and Romello Height, are phenomenal defensive ends. They're listed as outside linebackers by Texas Tech, but these guys are they play in a 4-man front, and they're the 2 guys that are on the edges. Sometimes, or maybe oftentimes, they're in a 3-point stance or a 2-point stance. It kind of depends. They're very comfortable as 2-point edge rushers. Either one of them could be 3-4 outside linebackers in the NFL. In fact, they probably will be. Their versatility allows them to play in different kinds of ways. They are very, very explosive players. Like, ASU has not gone up against anybody that has this amount of quickness and burst off the edge, while also they're powerful and they're creative in how they attack. And what Texas Tech does that I think is makes it so challenging is they run twist actions and stunts that are designed to free up either Height or Bailey by getting them wrapping around a defensive tackle who's angling out to try to take out like as a pick play almost, not only the guard but also the tackle, so that the guard can't slip inside and handle that inside stunt. And then what they'll do sometimes is they'll take either one of those players and they'll line them up behind their defensive line in an odd front, and then they allow that player to read the blocking and be able to sort of, squeeze around or through gaps to try to get to the quarterback in that way. And when you can rush 4 like that, stop the run, and also get to the passer, that makes it a major challenge, especially when Jacob Rodriguez is unquestionably one of the best linebackers in the country. He's an All-American type of a candidate, not just because he's a leading tackler, 50 tackles or whatever, but he has 5.5 for loss. They blitz him. He's great on 4th downs and 3rd and shorts. He's also one of the best forced fumble linebackers in the country. So yeah, I'm just giving an absolutely glowing review of their players. They tend to play when they're playing ahead, when they're leading, they play a lot of cover 2, which prevents teams from catching up with the deep ball. And so against this team in particular, you have to be able to stay attached to them on the scoreboard early in games. And you have to be able to either run the ball or have some screens. They have given up certain things in the passing game, run throughs where guys have caught the ball and been able to get a lot of yards after the catch. They've given up pass completions to the running backs. So there's things that they're not great at necessarily, but they're very good at so many things. And it starts with their ability to be dominant at the line of scrimmage, and that just creates a lot of knock-on challenges that opponents have to deal with.
Yeah, we spoke about their depth. Like Skylar Howard went out with an injury in the middle of the Kansas game, and they had AJ Holmes Jr. replace them, play a 44 snaps, and he recorded 2 sacks in that game. A guy they brought off from the bench stepped into the place of Skylar Howard, and he records 2 sacks. We also forgot to mention David Bailey leads the nation in sacks of 8.5. So yeah, just everything Chris is alluding to, they're just dominant from top to bottom.
Yeah, like both you guys were saying, tall task for ASU's offense. The last time we saw ASU's offense out there on the field in Utah, it wasn't pretty. Jeff Sims was at the helm. Now, according to you, Chris, and everything that we've been seeing at practice this week, Sam Leavitt is expected to play and start against Texas Tech on Saturday. How much does having him back change things for this offense? Obviously, it changes a lot, but what also do you guys think is going to be the game plan for Marcus Arroyo to try and exploit the things that you were talking about in Tech's defense, Chris, to try and give ASU a fighting chance in this one?
Well, yeah. Regardless of who takes the snap under center, we think it's going to be Leavitt. It's looking like it might be Leavitt. Texas Tech's going to get pressure on the quarterback. I mean, they've pressured everyone. They went against Utah. Kenny Dillon spoke about that after the Utah game, how he told his team, this team got pressure on Utah and Devin Dampier. Like, it's going to be a challenge come Saturday at Mountain America Stadium. So regardless of who's under center, it's going to be important that the offensive line, with Ben Coleman being out for the year, Wade Helton is expected to make his second ever collegiate start at center, Jamedo Bigbo stepping up to that left guard role for Ben Coleman. There's a lot of questions surrounding that offensive front and just how they're going to do against this strong of a pass rush. With that said, Chris spoke about how Texas Tech has surrendered a few things. A few screens kind of work against them. Sometimes when they're up by a lead, they play cover 2. That means those inside low checkdowns are there. They're there to be completed. So I think Offensively, Marcus Arroyo is going to have to put together a better offensive game plan than he did against Utah to give ASU a chance to be within this game come third and late fourth quarter.
Traditional run plays probably won't work that well with Raleek Brown running behind an offensive line that won't have Ben Coleman. Wade Helton didn't even really practice that much on Wednesday. They had Makua Pule take a lot of the center reps. If he goes up against Lee Hunter as a nose tackle, that's a mismatch advantage, I think, for Texas Tech. You have to almost use the athleticism of Tech against it with misdirections, with screens, get the ball to your tight ends and your running backs in the passing game. Tech's given up some wide receiver mesh where the receivers kind of come together in man coverage, moving to the inside, and then the running back runs a wheel route to the outside. Raleek Brown's a dynamic athlete. I think you got to figure out run replacement type passes, and then you got to be able to get the ball to your tight ends and your running backs. Tight ends, they haven't even really targeted them that much at all. If you do see a lot of cover two, they're going to try to keep Jordan Tyson from getting loose vertically. ASU wasn't able to take advantage of the single high looks early in the game with Jeff Sims at quarterback going up against Utah. If you get single high looks, you have to be able to beat those outside the numbers. But against the too high, you got to be able to exploit the middle of the field. That's where you run the tight end on the glance routes. That's where you run some, zone beaters. You get Jay Lamas or Derek Eusebio across the middle. You figure out ways to get, like double posts and things of that nature that try to expand coverage and have an underneath player behind it, like on an inbreaker with the post behind it. So there's different things that you can do structurally to try to account. One of the challenges of playing Texas Tech is they've been ahead in so many of these games that they've been able to play a lot more conservative coverages, and you don't even necessarily know what they're going to be prone to doing with a new coordinator in this situation when they're in a tighter game. So, but I also would say Sam Levitt, even though he's got the foot injury, he's going to have to be mobile and run around and make plays with his feet. He's going to have to extend plays. He's going to have to scramble because invariably Romello Height and their pass rush is so good that they are going to be able to move him off of his spot, and he's going to have to make improvisational plays, go run for the chains, try to scramble, get extension, post route. We saw they hit on a touchdown to Man Robinson in practice on Wednesday. That was a post route slip out, and he pointed to Robinson, and that led to a touchdown behind the defense. You're going to have to figure out creative, different ways and post route, scramble drill, Levitt, improvisation, I think, to be able to be successful in this game, because your traditional run actions, they're probably not going to be as effective against a team that's only giving up 62 yards per game on the ground.
Now, for some more insight into everything to know about Texas Tech's offense, defense, everything to know about the Red Raiders, we're going to welcome in Chris's interview with Jarrett Johnson, the publisher of InsideTheRedRaiders.com, underneath our 247 Sports umbrella. And let's toss over to that right now.
All right, back on the Son of a Source podcast, joined now by Jarrett Johnson, publisher at Inside the Red Raiders on 247sports.com. Jarrett, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing well. Big game on tap Saturday. Looking forward to that. Wanted to get your thoughts. Let's start by just talking about how this team has performed compared to what you kind of expected. They've been blowing everybody out, ranked number 7 in the country. Was this what you expected?
Yes and no. I mean, the non-conference was very weak, so we, everybody around town definitely expected Tech to, blow through that. But I don't know if we expected Tech to go to Utah and beat the Utes like they did there by 24 points. All the talk was about Utah's offensive line being the best in the country, and it's a very good offensive line. That's true. But I think Tech's defensive line kind of announced itself in that game, especially in the second half of that game. And we all knew that this was a special group, that especially that defensive front, the strength of the team. But it's been better than what we were expecting. And it's been a little bit of a surprise to me.
In what ways would you say that it's been better?
Yeah, I knew they would get after the quarterback. 9 sacks last week. Almost constant pressure from those edges, Romello Height and David Bailey. I mean, their credentials were very good. They've actually elevated their play since they've been at Texas Tech. But what I didn't see coming, especially from those two guys, was how good they'd be against the run. Tech is amongst the best in the country against the run. They're playing unselfishly. They're not just playing hero ball, trying to get stats. That's coming naturally by them, playing within the team concept. And then some of the guys that returned, even Jacob Rodriguez, I mean, pretty high expectations coming in the season as preseason Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. He's been better than expected so far because he's running free with that defensive line, just keeping offensive linemen off him. So that is how they've exceeded my expectations.
Yeah, I'm fascinated because it's new coordinators, a lot of new talent, and so how they were able to gel so quickly and put together a pretty seamless looking product. What do you think enabled all that?
The culture, I think that's what's been the least amount because it's hard to quantify, right? But that's been the least reported on. And you got to go to Joey McGuire and some of the guys around him who've established that culture over a couple of years. And then you got to tip the cap to James Blanchard, the general manager, and his crew. They didn't just go out and grab a bunch of talent and throw it at the coaches and say good luck. They had a plan. They had a fit. There were some really talented guys that they passed on because of that. And so far, at least through half the regular season, it's worked out according to plan.
Mm-hmm. How is the offense different than last year? Some pieces are back, but new coordinator. ASU played Texas State last year, so there's some familiarity in that respect. But how is that sort of manifested with the personnel that they have?
Yeah, the offensive line. That's a great question, but it's an easy answer because Tech hasn't had this kind of offensive line since, I don't think it's a coincidence since they had a really big season in 2008. And it's gotten better, steadily gotten better week by week. Utah had, going back to that game, and Houston, good defenses, solid against the run. These were road games, and the offensive line really wore those teams down in the second half. And this is something that we've seen happen to Texas Tech on the other side, where good teams have come in and Tech's kind of hit them in the mouth with a nice offensive game plan, but then the teams adjust, and then the beast in the trenches went out. Tech has flipped the script in that regard, and you saw that against Kansas last week. And I know Kansas has struggled against pretty much everybody against the run, but Tech really could have ran for as much as they wanted to against the Jayhawks last week. To be quite honest.
Yeah. What's your impression of the injury situation, especially at quarterback, and what's it been like seeing really super talented youngster go in there and seamlessly kind of be able to execute?
Yeah, first off, Barron, it's weird, and Coach McGuire touched on it Monday during his presser, but he is simultaneously injured often and also a really tough guy. I think that's kind of, they go hand in hand. It's like maybe he should sit out a week, but he doesn't, and he re-injures, something that he had hurt earlier in the year. It was against the opener where this injury that he's currently trying to come back from, where a free blitzer came off the edge and hit him where he didn't see him coming right in the shin. Coach McGuire actually said that he doesn't seem as sore this week as he was after the opener. So, I mean, I expect, just like with Levitt, I expect Barron to play. How limited he may or may not be, I don't know. I think we'll find out, Saturday with both those guys. But in terms of Will Hammond, I mean, both these guys were Elite 11 finalists, 4-star quarterbacks, highly touted. Will Hammond is a very serious dude, very interesting, serious guy. I remember, of course, interviewing him throughout the recruiting process, going back to his junior year. I mean, I made his profile when he got offered from a summer camp years ago. And he's just always been very serious, goal-oriented. And you see that play out in his preparation so that when he's called to go in there, he's ready. And also another key, last spring when Barron was rehabbing from shoulder surgery, Will took all the first-team snaps. So I think that really helped him in terms of knowing the personnel, learning what new offensive coordinator Mac Lefwitz wanted, and all of that. And then it just helps to be talented as well.
Mm-hmm. Cameron Dickey, I think he reminds some people a little bit of Cam Scatterbo. I don't know if you've heard that, but similar size, contact balance.
Yeah.
And he wasn't even necessarily expected to be the guy there going into the season. So what have you thought about his play, the run game, and then maybe just how complementary that they've been able to be offensively in a pass-heavy system that spreads the ball around?
Yeah, those are all really good questions. I'll start with the last one first. That was the first question I asked offensive coordinator Mac Leftwich, because for so long we've seen pass-heavy offenses, and there's been a lot of talk within the fan base and around Lubbock that maybe it's time to switch, to at least be a balanced offense. They ran Taj a lot, but it was really just him, like almost exclusively in terms of as a runner. They had Quentin Joyner come in from USC. He was expected to be the starter, but still mixed time with Jacoby Williams, who's more of a scat back. They'll split him out wide, and he is a threat as a receiver. And then Cam Dickey, was going to be the third down back, kind of short yardage, battering ram guy. But then Q went down with a non-contact ACL injury in fall camp. And so it's been a two-headed monster. And Cam Dickey, I'm going to be quite honest, I was a little skeptical considering all the investments in the rest of the roster, if he was going to be ready. I've always been high on him coming out of high school, but maybe it was a season too early for him to be in that featured role. And the first couple of games, even against lesser competition, he missed some holes. The vision wasn't quite there. He wasn't patient enough, but he has steadily improved. And then you saw last week what he did, having that monster game. And I think it's gone hand in hand with the improvement with the offensive line. And then to have Jacoby Williams, who's a completely different guy, a more elusive, dynamic in terms of in-space player, but who could still run the ball between the tackles. It's been a really good combo. I'm sorry, I forgot your first question.
Just about Dickey's style. I think is he's got a little bit of that hard nosed lunch pail. The Cam Scatterbo kind of a contact balance stuff there.
Well, that's high praise. First off, that would be amazing if he evolves into that. He is tough. He told me in preseason, what he really looks forward to in a football game personally is in the second half when guys start diving at his feet. Basically, guys start making business decisions. And I'm sure Cam saw a lot of that in his career. It still is, even in the NFL. And that's what we've seen. That's kind of been the blueprint is, wear guys out with the spread, throw it around, a lot of screens, a lot of things, take shots deep. And then the second half when defenses are worn down, you hit him with that battering ram. That's Cam Dickey. And I mean, it's been very successful so far.
Yeah. And then you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but this defense, the front four is very potent. They shut down the run. They get to the quarterback, don't even really need to bring a lot of blitzers to accomplish that. How impressed have you been by this group, and what does that enable through the rest of the defense?
I mean, we could do a series of videos on how impressed I've been, especially compared to some of Texas Tech's recent history. Going back in the day, they had some pretty good tandems, some All-American types, defensive ends. Even Tyree Wilson was a top 10 pick edge 4 or 5 years ago. But them as a tandem, I remember get Romello Height, which was a major recruiting coup. But then it was late in spring when they added David Bailey, and I talked to a very good source at Tech, and I said, is the idea for them to come off the opposite edges of the defense? And, absolutely. And it's been basically it's pick your poison. You can't double everybody. And against Houston, they decided to double Romello Height, which I understand. I mean, he's been living in backfields no matter who Tech plays. And David Bailey had 2 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, and a forced fumble. Against Kansas, they tried to single up and kind of take turns chipping those 2 guys. And, I mean, you saw the result, or you read about the result, the 9 sacks. Bailey had 3 sacks. I think Height had 2, but we're in on a number of pressures. And the problem is you have Lee Hunter in the middle as well, who you have to double him. I mean, he commands a double team, 6'3", 330. He's one of those freaks in terms of athleticism and his size. He will just wreck your offense if you don't double him. I mean, he's really I guess I could say the tip of the spear could be him or those two guys on the edges, or J-Rod behind him at Jacob Rodriguez at inside linebacker. But you got some other guys. Skylar Gill Howard's out this week, and that is a big loss. He's an emotional leader, but a very good player. But Anthony Holmes, who they got from Houston, followed Sheil Wood, the defensive coordinator, has been, quite honestly, just as good. He had a big sack, a couple of tackles for loss last week. So it's been pick your poison, which is the most impressive thing for me. Tech has had one or two standouts here or there, that teams could really focus on, but you can't do that with this defensive front. And the fact that they're playing so unselfish in terms of against the run or pass has made it even more potent. So, I mean, it's been the real deal up to now. I am anxious to see what it looks like against Arizona State. Good offensive line, good running game, and all that. Veteran quarterback, good coaching staff. It's another test. I know they're expecting the Sun Devils' best shot, and it's going to be must-watch TV to me.
So a top 10 team in all kinds of big national categories. Is there any chink in the armor? Is there anything about this team that you go, well, they're maybe average in that respect?
Red zone defense has been red zone offense, efficiency has been a problem. You saw against Houston. I want to give them credit. Houston's been pretty good against everybody they played so far, other than Tech, but they battled Tech in the red zone, stayed in that game for a while by, holding them to field goals. Their secondary was very good in terms of battling Tech's receivers. And then even last week, Kansas did a pretty good job of sticking with Tech's receivers before Tech just ran the ball basically the whole second half. So I'm not ready to say the red zone offensive efficiency is definitely a problem. I'm not ready to say that these receivers aren't talented, because they are. We've seen them do it, a couple of them for years. But that is something I'm monitoring going forward that could keep Tech from possibly achieving a lot of their lofty goals they want.
So you mentioned 2008 earlier. I'm just curious, is this the best Texas Tech team that you've ever watched or seen? Is this the team that people are talking about that has the most potential this century, or going back to when? And so how would you characterize what's possible for this group?
Well, it has the potential to be the best team in Texas Tech history. My dad used to tell me potential means you haven't done anything yet, son. They're halfway through the season. That 2018 beat 3 or 4 ranked teams consecutively. They lost big to Oklahoma. That Big 12 South division was amazing that year. So that it's right now, I'm not ready to say that this team is better in terms of what it's accomplished so far. But in terms of talent on paper and potential and what we've seen so far, yeah, it definitely has so much depth, so much talent, so much more size than we're used to seeing at Texas Tech along the offense and defensive lines. And then it's also pretty fast. It still has that skill position component as well.
So how much of a celebrity is Cody Campbell now in and around Lubbock? And what's this been like for fans and people who are following the team closely to see this roster be assembled in this way in this particular era of college football?
Yeah, another good question, man. Yes, to answer your question, he is a celebrity. His name is literally on the field. It all started with Colorado came in. It's a big matchup for Texas Tech. And, for all the flash in terms of Shadur Sanders being a Heisman candidate and all that, and Coach Prime, they really whipped Tech in the trenches. And it was obvious to everybody. And, a former NFL lineman and Texas Tech offensive lineman, Cody Campbell, certainly recognized that. And one of the fans on Twitter infamously said, "Will you buy us an offensive line?" And he said, "I will." And "I will" has become it has morphed into within, of course, how the rules changed and everything for that offseason to the whole roster. It's not just him. There are some other big time donors who have invested heavily. And I think at first the thought was, how is this going to work? Is it a mercenary team? How do you put all these pieces together? Could this be a complete disaster? All that thing, because Tech's, look, this is the 100th season of Tech football, and it hasn't been an illustrious, history. especially compared to the other sports, just quite honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So most people were taking the wait and see, like the whole "I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid" thing. There's people still literally today on our board saying I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid, despite all the all the stats and all the things. And if you just watch the games, it's pretty obvious what they've done so far, at least. But the excitement is definitely building week by week. I mean, they haven't trailed so far. Like I mentioned in a couple of videos yesterday that I wouldn't be surprised, having been to that venue before. I saw the Blvd 20 touchdown game or whatever in person, 9 touchdown, whatever it was, on like one of the hottest days on that day ever. That was one of my senior writers called that Dante's Inferno. That was a disaster. So I had the audacity to say Tech might trail, but I could see, good staff, good venue. They have very talented players too. Maybe they jump out early, and people just were like throwing stuff at me. They're not going to trail, So that's how it's kind of changed from, well, believe it when I see it. It is Texas Tech. Something's going to happen, to how dare you say that Texas Tech, who hasn't trailed in a game this season, might trail on the road against the defending Big 12 champs. So it is changing.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Keys to the game for Texas Tech to emerge victorious in Tempe, and what's your prediction? We're going to do a Q&A exchange that people are going to be able to also read on each site. That we'll have this. I'm straight up letting you know I'm going to pick Texas Tech to win this game, probably by around the spread, which is like 10 or so points, 10, 11 points. I think that is a reasonable line for this game. What are your thoughts? What must ASU do to get an upset, and what do you think the score is going to be, and why?
Well, in terms of what I think Arizona State needs to do, this is going to sound cliche, but this is what I believe. They're going to have to get out to an early lead, consistently make quality adjustments, because that's something we saw from Texas Tech's coordinators last week. It was the first time they kind of got hit in the mouth and had to respond, and boy, clearly they did. Can Arizona State, play that chess match, not just show up with a good game plan, but, continually counter what Tech's doing. And then they're going to have to win the turnover battle. I mean, like I said, I know those all sound cliche, but that's what I've thought about in terms of this game. That would be the recipe, because there is depth. Like if Morton goes down, you already mentioned Will Hammond. I mean, they have that in a lot of positions. It's not just quarterback. In terms of my prediction, I've already gone on my way to express my sincere respect for Arizona State. I think it will be closer in the first half, but until someone proves otherwise, this offense and defensive lines just flat out wear teams out in the second half. And the first time it really became apparent was at Utah. So I have 38-13 Texas Tech.
Wow, that's a blowout. Look, ASU
that's their
has
average, though. That's their average, whether it be at Utah or at home against. They're winning by 24, 25 points per game in Big 12. So, I mean,
I can't knock that. I mean, this is a dominant team. I think it's the best Big 12 team since ASU's been a part of the Big 12. The areas that you're talking about have not been strengths for ASU. The Sun Devils have tended to start slower. They haven't done well enough in the red area, offensively, even defensively at times. The potent offensive line of Utah gave ASU a lot of problems. Totally different style with the triple option versus more conventional run game. I think ASU will do better on average against the conventional run game, but the talent is, I think, outstanding. You would expect that. A team that has probably twice as much money on the roster. And ASU has responded well to adversity over the last year and a half under Dillingham, and we'll see how they handle it. I think Sam Leavitt's going to go in this game, and that's a totally different scenario versus Jeff Sims. But I don't think ASU's played a team that is anywhere near as good as Texas Tech. And if it is a home blowout, that's going to send ASU fans into a really tailspin. 2 in a row.
Tech's been there for most of its history. I will say this though, Tech is. I just want to throw it out there. Tech has spent a lot of money. That's reported, that's documented. I think we also, or at least I do, I need to recognize that they've done a good job putting that talent in the right
Clearly.
spots.
I mean, to have two new coordinators and to be able to get the all of these guys to gel, and you don't have there's no like apparent egos about the money or anything. I mean, I think McGuire's done a phenomenal job. I know he's referred to himself as sort of like a CEO of what they're trying to do. And I think he's doing an excellent job. So looking forward to the game. Jarrett, thanks a lot for being part of the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on. Anytime.
My pleasure.
Welcome back into the Sun Devil Source podcast presented by Jones Auto Centers. If you want to pursue a chill vibe or get a boost or drink something that'll help you sleep without any of the extra calories, sugar, caffeine, or carbs that you don't want, make sure to visit drinkontheslide.com and use our Sun Devil Source QR code that I've thrown on the screen right now to get 20% off of your order. That's right, 20% off using that QR code. We appreciate Drink on the Sly for helping to sponsor this podcast. All right, now you guys also might be noticing that Cam Scadaboo artwork right behind Chris's head right there. To his right, if you're watching on video, you can see a little bit of that Camp Tonazona water tower painting. That's courtesy of Christopher Roach. He's a local artist who does a lot of great work with ASU artwork, as well as a lot of great non-ASU artwork as well on his website, ChristopherRoachArt.com. He has that Cam Scadaboo one that you can see on screen right now, the Jail Mary, the Camp T Water Tower one is also a big hit, as well as the Pat Tillman one. A lot of great different ASU artwork that you can get your hands on if you're a diehard Sun Devil fan. We appreciate Christopher Roach Art for his support in the Devil Sanctuary board, as well as this podcast. And like I said, ChristopherRoachArt.com. That's ChristopherRocheart.com. All right, let's get into the nitty gritty that everybody's here for this episode. Keys to the game and prediction. Not going to waste any time. Let's start with you, Joaquin.
Well, yeah, I think the biggest thing, and this has kind of plagued Arizona State all season, when they do get into the red zone, they're going to have to make the most of those trips. Arizona State's not going to be in the red zone every drive, willy-nilly get in there. Okay, I'll take 3 points. No, against Texas Tech and this strong of a defense, when you do get into that red zone, you're going to have to make the most of that situation. On top of that, regardless of whether Sam Levitt or Jeff Sims makes the start at center, we think it's going to be Levitt. They're going to have to be productive on these downs. You can't afford to lose your yards on first down, on second down. Give yourself in third and non-manageable situations. You have to give yourself a chance to be within third down and a chance to actually convert. With all of that said, though, I predicted this in the preseason podcast we did. That was almost a little more than a month ago at this point. And I predicted Texas Tech would be Arizona State's only loss this season. And with just all the injuries plaguing the Sun Devils, the questions surrounding the tackling and defense, I have Texas Tech ultimately winning this game 41-30. They've won every game by a score of at least 24 points. So I think Arizona State kind of gets way closer to the 24 margin than every other team has, but I have Texas Tech winning 41-30.
Yeah, I think ASU needs to come out faster. You can't hang back and be a second half team against Texas Tech because the game's probably going to be over by that point. So I think drive maximization is huge. And a big part of that is not having the plays that beat yourself, the holding penalties, the procedural penalties, the guys that make them have a mental mistake and then you give up a sack or whatever. Sam Levitt needs to get the ball out of his hand. If you're going to scramble, you got to make sure that you're not taking a big loss because Texas Tech gets so many negative yardage plays with their defense that then that kills drives. You need a high drive maximization. And part of that, as Joaquin said, is you have to convert scoring opportunities into touchdowns against this team. ASU's been bad in the red zone, especially in the low red goal line situations. That you can't afford that. This has to be ASU's best offensive performance of the season for the Sun Devils to win this game. I don't think that they're ready to accomplish that. I think that they will have a better defensive performance than against Utah, but you're not going to just shut down Texas Tech. Too potent, too good, too versatile in terms of the way that it generates offense. I don't think that the Red Raiders are going to have as much success as they've had against most of their opponents this year. There are chances for ASU, okay? Kansas was down 21-17 at halftime, I believe, in their last game at halftime. And that was even with Kansas's backup quarterback coming in for a run play and fumbling and losing the ball and other miscues that Kansas had. This is not an impossible team to beat or to hang in there if you're ASU. It's just that I don't like the matchups, especially when ASU's got O-line injuries and the way that this team played with the physicality not being up to par in the last game, coupled with Sam Levitt's mobility probably being less than 100%. You put those three things stacked on top of one another, and I think Texas Tech is going to win this game, something on the order of 31-20.
All right. I think that when you look at this matchup, Kenny Dillingham put it best in his press conference at Utah when the three of us were there in Salt Lake City. He said, look, this is a Utah team that just dominated us physically, and Texas Tech dominated them physically. I think that you had a lot of great points in your part about ASU's defense, Chris, where you said if it was an anomaly against Utah and not a trend, maybe ASU's defense can hang in this game. And I think that that's going to be probably the biggest key to this game. Can ASU's defense be physical? Can that defensive line get pressure on the quarterback, whichever quarterback Texas Tech has in there? Can ASU's linebacker core hold up and not allow plays to burst for those extra yardage, give up those explosive plays, let Texas Tech get to the second level? I think that's going to be key. I think we're going to need to see a much better game out of ASU's linebacker core. So that physicality on defense is one thing for me. The second thing for me is going to be ASU's offensive line. You're down Ben Coleman, a seventh-year leader. You have a lot of shuffling around going on, and you're playing one of the best defensive lines in the country. If that unit doesn't respond, ASU is going to get decimated in this game. If Sam Levitt is consistently under pressure, he's already dealing with that injury that everybody has been talking about. If ASU's offensive line can't step up to the task, then it's going to be a very long day for Sun Devil fans. The third key, I hate to do this to him because he's dealing with the injury, but I think that, like you were saying, Levitt is going to need to be able to extend plays. ASU's offensive line, even if ASU's offensive line completely steps up to the task, against a defensive line this good, that's still going to include a lot of pressure coming at Levitt. Even if ASU's offensive line plays as good as we could possibly expect them to play, there will still be pressure. So Levitt needs to be able to toughen up, extend those plays, find guys downfield. Like both of you guys were saying, this would have to be ASU's best offensive performance of the entire season, converting in the red zone, getting those explosives, extending plays in order for ASU to have a fighting chance in this one. And I want to go back to that point about the physicality and the defense. I don't think that ASU has much of a chance in this one. I think even if the Utah performance was an anomaly, you can't ignore getting dominated physically that severely against a Utah team. And then you play Texas Tech a week later, who dominated Utah in a blowout fashion. I don't see any world where ASU in 1 week, just by practicing harder and upping physicality and having a lot of motivation coming into this matchup, can suddenly produce a level of physicality that can stop Texas Tech in a way that they haven't been stopped at all year en route to being a top 10 team in college football. My official prediction is going to be Texas Tech winning in a high-scoring one, 45-27. In terms of other Sun Devil Source staff predictions, Sun Devil Source MMJ Gabby Chernoff is predicting a Texas Tech win, 35-23. Sun Devil Source staff writer Luke Lindler is predicting a Texas Tech win, similar score, 31-23. And another similar score, Sun Devil Source staff writer Jake Sloan is predicting Texas Tech to win, 34-17. So that marks the first time this entire season that all 6 of us have predicted ASU to lose in a matchup on one of these Thursday podcasts. So that tells you something, that this is a Texas Tech team that's not to be played with.
Loaded. This is all the analysis I think is accurate. Now ASU has responded well under Dillingham to losses in the last year and a half. They have had some shocking performances. Remember at Washington a couple years ago, nobody really expected that. This defense is, we're going to find out, like, are you able to summon enough to be able to shock the college football world? That's what it would be if ASU, no matter that ASU is a returning Big 12 champion, it would be a shocking result for ASU to win this game as a 10, 11 point underdog at home, given what just happened against Utah. And we're going to see what happens.
Yeah, we're going to see what happens. All 3 of us, along with our entire Sun Devil Source staff, will be there at Mountain America Stadium for the afternoon game this Saturday. Should be a lot of fun covering it together as a group. That'll be it for this Sun Devil Source podcast episode. Like I said, we'll all be at the game, so if you see us around, be sure to say hi. We'll have all the coverage that you guys will need in terms of articles, highlights going up on socials during the game, post-game highlights, post-game show, pressers, everything that you guys need will be available on our Sun Devil Source socials and sundevilsource.com. We appreciate everybody who tuned into this Sun Devil Source podcast episode, and we'll see you all in the next one.